All right, gentlemen, let's roll over to our biggest questions for the defense and kind of what that looks like. And we'll just kind of dive right in, big picture for the defense. And that is, can I always like blur
Krish
his name
Ash.
together. Yeah,
Yeah.
apparently I have a speech impediment when I speak about Chris Ash, but can he keep things rolling as the defensive coordinator? Big shoes to fill, obviously, with Al Golden headed off to the NFL.
I mean, this is by far the biggest question on
Right.
defense, like by far. And there's some other things that we'll get into that are important, but look, Al Golden did an excellent job in Notre Dame the last 3 years. And I like, people, this mistake, and like every coach has those mistakes. The fact of the matter is, Al Golden did a heck of a job in his 3 years in Notre Dame. Heck of a job. And he did it his way. I mean, there were things that he liked to do. Marcus Freeman gave him the freedom to do that. And this notion that, like, well, Marcus Freeman's going to make sure the defense doesn't go poorly. I'm like, well, yeah, to a degree there's that. But he also has shown that he's going to let the defensive coordinator coach the defense the way he wants to coach the defense. There's obviously certain principles that Marcus Freeman looked for when he hired a guy. But it's still going to be, hey, this is your job. I'm the head coach. This is your job to coach the defense. And there's so many different layers to this. Number one is, will he be as good at picking apart the little things to look for to go after an offense? Will he do a good job of the pressures, whether he blitzes 80% of the time or 10% of the time? Will they be as effective as Al Golden's pressures were when he was really rolling with this defense? And will he maximize the talent in the secondary appropriately? Because you can say I have these two really good players, but if I'm going to ask them to do things that they're not necessarily great at, then that's not being a good football coach. It's like we blame Brian Van Gorder for not getting more out of Jalen Smith. Well, how do you do that? By not putting him in as many situations to impact the game that you should, and then also not designing a defense that fits what he did well, and the fact that they never let Jalen Smith really rush the quarterback in his tenure or blitz a lot in his tenure, I think was a mistake. So there's just so many different things to this that you look at and say, I need to see who he is. Does he make in-game adjustments as good as Al Golden did? Does he game plan as well as Al Golden did? Is he as good in certain situations as Al Golden was? Are they as aggressive? Do they force as many turnovers? Does he improve in certain areas where Al Golden maybe wasn't always great? Can they tackle better? And we'll talk about some other things, but man, and then the final piece to me is, does he interact as well with the staff as Al Golden did with members of the staff? Like, especially with the linebackers coach, Max Bola, and then Mike Mickens, where Mike Mickens had a lot of say in the structure of this pass coverages the last couple of years, especially last year. Does he get as much of a say in that as it happened before? Those are all answers that we need to find with Chris Ash. But at the end of the day, it's like, does he just keep this thing rolling in his way, right? Like, I don't need him to be the next Al Golden. Just like I won't ask the next guy to be the next Mike Mickens. I'm not asking Jawan Sider to be the next Dylan McCullough. You be you, but the results better be the same.
The standard is what the standard is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do it your way. Do it how. I don't need him to run the same coverages that Al Golden did at the same amount. I don't need him to blitz the same. And you be you. But at the end of the day, the results better be the same, which is a dominant defense. And then if he can even elevate it a little bit, that'd be even better.
That's okay too.
Because we shouldn't assume that it's not capable to be even better than it was. I think Al Golden did a great job, but I don't think that this defense was absolutely as good as it could ever be. I think there's certainly room to improve, and that's an expectation for Chris Ash to do, because good night, he's got a lot of talent. I mean, goodness gracious, this is a really talented defense. So, but, I mean, guys, we were just talking about, I think it was Trev, maybe it's Vince, but how do you have a defense that doesn't maximize Jalen Smith and Isaac Rochelle and Sheldon Day and Jerron Jones and Romeo Okwara and Jalen Smith and Kivari Russell and Cole Luke and James Onwualu and Matthias Farley and Max Redfield and Elijah Shoemate and on and on and on and on? your defensive coordinator doesn't do a good job of maximizing that talent, that's how. You know, like you go look at the 2015 roster and compare it to the 2018 or the 2017 roster, and you're like, dude, that's not even close. And then I look at the 2017 defense, and I'm like, yeah, that was a better defense.
Yeah.
Than the 2015 defense was.
Yeah.
Why? Was it a player problem? Not at all. It was a coaching problem.
The person steering the ship in 2017 was different than the one steering the ship in 2015. And this is the one question on the entire list that I couldn't even begin to formulate an answer. This is the one that I have the most difficult time with, because on one hand, you return every major position coach. Al Washington comes back. Max Bullock comes back. Mike Mickens comes back. You have all the talent. You're bigger. You're longer. You're more athletic in certain areas than you were on last year's defense.
I would argue they're more athletic just in general.
As a whole,
agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. But then on the other hand, the person who is kind of conducting this orchestra, you have no idea what it's going to be. You have no idea what the final product is going to look like. I think we have ideas, but some of it you have to make inferences from. This is what he did this year because he had this type of player, and he's said before, it's a lot of looking in between the lines. And this is one of the very few questions that we will have to, and it won't even be fully answered on August 31st.
It's going to take a few games.
Sure. It'll be an ongoing evaluation of really the 25, because we didn't know what Al Golden's defense was going to look like just based on what they did against Ohio State in 2022.
Do y'all remember how good Brian Van Gorder's defense looked the first couple games of the 2014 season?
I blacked it out.
Shutting out Michigan, and people are like, oh, you were wrong on that hire. And I was like, let it play out.
Just be patient.
And then by the time we got to North Carolina, everybody's like, oh, now I see what you were talking about. Now I get it. And because in all seriousness, I mean, look, they gave up 17 points to Rice. Rice scored a garbage touchdown late. They beat Michigan 31-0. They beat Purdue 30-14. Beat Syracuse 31-15. Beat Stanford 17-14. And then people are like, well, but here's what they did the rest of the year: 43 to North Carolina, 31 to Florida State, 39 to Navy, 55 to Arizona State. Really, let's say 34 to Arizona State because there were 3 pick sixes. 43 to Northwestern, who, by the way, coming into that game in 2014, Northwestern had scored 24-15, 24-29, 20-17, 17-7, 9-43 against Notre Dame. So just let's remember that one. 31 to Louisville, who had a true freshman quarterback who ended his career playing wide receiver, and Raji Bonifant for that team. And then 49 to USC in a game where if he wanted to, Steve Sarkisian could have hung 70 on that team in 2014.
Yeah.
Like, he called off the dogs in a big way in that game. Remember they had like that 20-something play drive with Max Brown, a quarterback? They could have easily hung 2 or 3 more touchdowns on that game. And then, of course, gave 28 points to LSU, although there was a kick return. But, once people had some film on it, it got exposed. So it is about November will give us a much better sense of things, good or bad. If they're not great in the first 2 games, that doesn't mean they're not going to be elite in November. Just because they look great in September doesn't mean they're going to look great in November. But we'll at least get a glimpse of it. But I could point to things. You remember this? I could point to things in the first few games and be like, yeah, I know it's working out now, but guys, that's going to become a problem. I did the same thing with John Tenuta, and you're like, yeah, it's working now because people don't have film on, but wait until they get film on that, and this is exactly what's going to happen, and it's exactly what happened. So even if the results are good, we'll be able to look and say, yeah, it's not that great, or maybe like, hey guys, if he keeps this up, it's going to be what we think it is. So that early season test will be huge. But yeah, guys, the Chris Ash thing is just hands and head and shoulders above, far and away, whatever expression you want to use, the biggest question. And when we say question, we're not talking like it's going to be bad. It's an unknown, and how well he answers the impression he makes, how well he does is going to determine a lot about this. And you don't want to have your freshman quarterback, redshirt freshman quarterback, or redshirt sophomore quarterback have to get in shootouts every week because you can't stop anybody, especially when you get to the postseason.
I had mentioned earlier about the fact that Notre Dame has a bunch of guys returning on this team overall, and that goes for the defense. There's a bunch of guys returning, but there's also a bunch of guys that are not returning. And that's our next question is, will they be able to replace the departed star power? Because they have lost guys at every level. How are they going to replace those guys, and what is that going to look like, Trev?
I want to kick this
Brian.
to Trev. I want to say this because it's this, Trev. It's not that they lost volume. It's the guys they lost were important.
Absolutely.
It's the star power. That's where I'm coming from with this question. It's not how do they replace the departed players. It's those guys were stars. Those guys were leaders. Those guys were playmakers. It's not so simple as just plugging a talented player into that role and saying, go have fun. There's multiple ways to replace a guy. Leonard Moore stepped in for Benjamin Morrison and was phenomenal. With all due respect to the D tackles last year, they were not Riley Mills when they stepped into the lineup.
No.
Where does it look? What does it look like? That's where I'm coming from with this question mark, Trev.
No, absolutely. This question is fascinating. 4 of your 5 captains on last year's team were on defense. Ben Morrison, Xavier Watts, Jack Kaiser, Riley Mills. How do you replace their impact? You know, we talk a lot about Xavier Watts, who's just always right place, right time. You need a play to change the momentum of the game. Where's 0? You need somebody to dial up a pressure. You need somebody to change the game up front. You lean on 99. Where's Riley Mills? Same thing with Jack Kaiser at his level of defense. But not only did you lose impact, you lost impact at every level. You lost 2 D linemen. You lost a linebacker who's played the most snaps in Notre Dame's program's history. You lost Xavier Watts, the most decorated safety that's ever wore the blue and gold, and Ben Morrison, the player who kind of changed the trajectory of what it meant to play corner at Notre Dame. One of. How do you replace that? And I think where I take this question, because I'm fully on board with you, I think it's going to be interesting to see where Marcus Freeman's philosophy leads him to replacing these guys. Because you're right, it's not just as simple as, all right, well, Jason Onye will start for Riley Mills and Gabe Rubio will start for Howard Cross and, you know, battle for Will in the offseason. And we'll see if one of our 4 stud safeties can replace Xavier Watts on paper. But the philosophy is, well, you don't replace Riley Mills with one guy. It's about replacing the production. Okay. Well, you're replacing Riley Mills, who led your team in sacks. You're replacing Jack Kaiser, who led your team in tackles. And you're replacing Xavier Watts, who led your team in interceptions. So if the expectation is you just do it with a host of players, how many guys are going to rotate in on defense? How do you replace that? That's kind of where I took this question of, okay, so is Notre Dame just going to play 30 guys on defense this year to match what the production of an individual player was? That's an interesting question because it's, okay, yes, we understand the host of talent they have and the amount of depth that they have, but how do you use it to replace that impact talent?
Right.
And then, of course, the leadership question. I know we kind of covered it in the beginning, but the defensive side of the ball, that was a side of the football that could be heavily relied on for Notre Dame in 2024. Of, okay, we need somebody to make a play. Hey, Xavier. Hey, BMO. Hey, Kaiser, we need to stop here. Hey, Riley, we need you to get after the quarterback this down. Hey, man, we need to run stuff. You're 6'5", 300 pounds. It's 3rd and 2. We need you. You know, who steps up into all of those roles? It's very interesting because it is at every level, and their impact was that big.
I love that you said it's not about, okay, who at 3 technique replaces Riley Mills, who at field safety replaces Xavier Watts. It doesn't always have to be a guy that replaces that star power at that position. The replacement for Riley Mills' star power could be the ends. It could be a Jason Onye, Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch, Jared Dawson type of guy, but it doesn't have to be. Jack Kaiser's excellence doesn't need to get, like the things he did well in this production doesn't need to get replaced by the Will. It can, but it could also get replaced by Drake Bowen. Xavier Watts doesn't need to be the replacements for Xavier Watts doesn't necessarily have to be Xavier Watts. Don Schuler could be that answer. And so I think to your point, Trev, I think you nailed the spirit of where I'm going with this question mark is it's about the playmakers. Who is your 3rd down stopper? Who is your guy that gets after the quarterback when it matters most? Khalid Kareem didn't rack up a ton of sacks in his career. I think he had never had more than 5 in a season. But didn't it always feel like every time he got a sack, it was like in a really important moment in the game? I mention that all the time.
Yes.
It was, Julian Aguara is going to rack up the stats, but Khalid's going to give you the winning moments, and you need both. They both matter. I love those money down players, those guys that they're going to step up when the game's on the line. And for all the crap that Christian Gray caught last year, he was a money down player with one exception, and that was the play against Ohio State. But he had so many times when he stepped up in the fourth quarter on fourth down and made a huge play last year. That's what you're looking for. And that's what Benjamin Morrison was when he was healthy. That's what Xavier Watts was. That's what, Riley Mills was. And that's what we don't know. There's a ton of talent, ton of depth, all that stuff. Like Vince said, there's a lot coming back. But it's not just about are you talented and do you produce, but you could be a guy that has 12 tackles, but that one missed tackle you made was on 3rd and 1 with the game on the line, or 4th and 1 with the game on the line. Well, that's the only I'd rather you would have had 3 tackles and made that one than have 12 and miss that one. Yeah, you only gave up 1 completion the whole game. It just so happened it was the game-winning touchdown. Well, I would have rather you give up 5 completions but made that stop.
Yeah.
It's all of that encompassing into this question mark is when you say, okay, how is this team championship caliber? That's the question that I have, is who are the money players for Notre Dame? And it can be it could be different guy every week. I mean, the 2 of the biggest stops of the Penn State game were made by Josh Burnham and Christian Gray. I think that early drive, 3rd down, they tried to run stretch where they killed Notre Dame with that in the first half. Who was the guy that came up and blew that play up? It's Christian Gray. Who was the guy that on 2nd and goal from the 1 makes that huge, or 1st and goal from the 2, makes that huge tackle for loss that then put Penn State behind the 8 ball, or behind the sticks a little bit. Then they got to throw a pass, it gets dropped. But it was that play that by Josh Burnham that drove that thing back. It's that. It could be a position, it could be a player, but it's needed if this team is going to repeat what it did last year.
Another aspect that kind of dives into a little bit more X's and O's and they're Jimmy's and Joe's as well. But this was always a piece that we always talked about, Brian, when it came to defense under Al Golden. And there were times where it was a schematic decision, and then there were times where it just wasn't very good. And we're talking about, will the run defense be better this year than it has been? And that's a big one moving forward here, I think. And I'm going to throw it to you, Brian, because I know, because there's a difference between, like, okay, you know what, we're going to give up some rush yards because we're going to take away the pass, things like that. But there were also plenty of times also where they just weren't stopping the run.
Yeah, the first half against Penn State wasn't, well, we're going to let them beat us with stretch all day,
right,
running a football, because we're going to make sure the receivers don't catch a pass.
Right.
Maybe that was the game plan. It's probably not a smart one, because
right.
That's the unit you're not worried as much about. No, you're absolutely right, Vince. There were times we talked about last year, like, hey, guys, they were willing to give that play up. 3rd and 12, they run for 9 yards. They were willing to let that happen because they weren't going to let them complete a pass beyond the sticks. Okay, that's fine. There were certainly games that we looked at the last couple of years where, like, yeah, they were willing to give up some of those yards because, they weren't doing this and weren't doing that. Northern Illinois didn't run for 190 yards on Notre Dame because Notre Dame let them run for 190 yards. They ran for 190 yards because they just whooped Notre Dame in the run game. They didn't give up Penn's over 200 yards rushing in the semifinals and championship game because they were so hyper-focused on stopping the pass game. Like, you still did poorly. You still had bad run fits. You still had bad tackling. Like, that's not a game plan decision. And I just don't think you need to give up that much in order to stop something else. And here's the end of the day, you still didn't even stop the other thing. Because when they needed plays in the passing game, they still got them. So you didn't even get that. So, I remember now Golden said it, and I didn't love it at the time. I understood it. But I think there's kind of happy medium. He's like, I don't really care about leading the nation in rush defense. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, because 10, 15 years ago, that was a pretty important thing. Like, you want to win a title, you better be pretty good at stopping the run. I don't know that you necessarily have to be like but I mean, guys, the teams that are winning titles are still really good stopping the run. Ohio State last year finished 3rd in the country in stopping the run. Michigan in 2023 finished 6th. Now 6th against a weak schedule, but Even if you go look at what they did in the late in the season, I mean, they still held Washington to 46. Bama went for 172. A lot of that was scrambles. They only averaged 4 yards a carry. Held Iowa to 35. Ohio State to 107. Penn State went for 164, but it was only 4.7 a carry. I mean, they were dominant. The only game where they gave up over 5 yards per carry was against Nebraska in a 45-7 win. So I don't think they were really concerned about it that game. 2022, Georgia led the nation in rush defense. In 2021, Georgia was number 2 in the nation in rush defense. In 2020, the COVID year, which was a bit of an anomaly year, Bama ranked 17th that year. 2019, LSU finished 21st in rush defense that year. 2018, Clemson finished 4th. So the 2 years where the championship team didn't have an elite rush defense was what? 2 of the best offensive football teams we've ever seen in Alabama 2020 and LSU 2019. So unless you plan on having that, it might be kind of important to be a pretty good run stopping defense. I still think that matters more than I think Al Golden thought it did. That was the one area where I was like, I don't really love that he has that philosophy. There's things that if I was a head coach, I wouldn't have him play as much of this as that. That's more of a preference thing, not a this works or that doesn't work thing. And to a degree, I also think Al Golden's decision to do that was a wise one. When you have an undersized defensive line, you're not going to be a big, physical, nasty, dominant run-stopping line. You're gonna have your moments, but this defense, there's no excuses for this defense not to be better stopping the run. Like, no excuse.
Yeah,
you're bigger, you're faster, you're experienced. Just none.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the playoffs is I think it perfectly encompasses what you're talking about in terms of being able to stop the run. You go back and look at some of the closer games that Notre Dame played last year. Penn State, why was that game so close? Because they gave up over 200 rushing yards, 204 to be exact. Ohio State, with all their firepower on offense, with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate, rushed for 214 yards. USC, people remember, Jaden Maeva kind of tearing up Notre Dame secondary a little bit. They also rushed for 197 yards that game in a shootout. And so that is extremely important. That could be one thing that I didn't think about this until you brought it up about just Al Golden's overall philosophy. I wonder if some of that was what he got from the NFL. Because in the NFL,
I agree. I think that's spot on, Trev.
Because, you think in the NFL, you have all these high-powered quarterbacks. Week in and week out, you're going against Pat Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and all these other guys. And you have dominant run teams. You think about teams that are dominant on the ground, like San Francisco when Christian McCaffrey's healthy, or Derrick Henry, depending on what team he's on. But if you can shut down a passing attack in the NFL, you're going to have a successful defense. And I think some of that may have carried over to a lot of his coaching philosophy at college. But at the college level, we've seen it with Notre Dame. They made the national title game with the 101st ranked passing offense in the country last year. Running the football is carried in a little bit of a different light. So, yeah, I just thought about that when you were talking about his coaching philosophy. And I wonder if some of that was carried over from his time in the league. But that's interesting.
No, I think that is absolutely spot on, because you don't have to be a dominant run defense to win and to have a great defense in the NFL. I think statistically, when I look at it, that's exactly what I see. I just don't think it's as necessary in the NFL to have that. And
one thing that is necessary at both levels in the NFL and in college, though, is a pass rush. Notre Dame has a lot of potential when it comes to the personnel that they have as far as pass rushing units. And look, you put a great piece out on the message boards about the defensive line unit and what some of the expectations were on that. Go check it out. It's in the Champions Lounge, boards.irishbreakdown.com. A lot of good summer intel in there. But the final question that we do have on defense is, will the pass rush potential turn into pass rush production? Brian, you say it all the time that, as a coach, you have a love-hate relationship with potential talk.
Love it in the offseason, hate it in the season. Yeah,
exactly. And so when you start talking about this Notre Dame pass rush as a whole, kind of goes back to, losing Riley Mills, your most proven pass rusher. Where's the pressure going to come from this year? What does the up-the-middle pressure look like? Do the edge rushers take that next step? It's a very valid question when you look at the 25 season as a whole.
I mean, Vince, we talk about this all the time, man. It's not even about ranking in the top 10 in sacks. It's not about ranking in the top 10 in pressures. It's about when you need it, can you get after the quarterback? And where I'm also coming from with this, guys, it goes even just beyond just the pass rush per se. It's also about, can you do it without having to blitz all the time and bring 5-6 man pressures all the time? That's just like last year against Ohio State. They brought a blitz because they didn't think they could, in that last big play.
The last one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. It's harder to play over the top of Christian Gray there, or whoever's defending Jeremiah Smith. If Leonard Moore was defending Jeremiah Smith, I would have played over the top of it too. And it's just a bad call. But it's harder to do that when you have to trigger linebackers to get to the quarterback because the safety has to come down and protect that linebacker. And, just you need to be able to get after the quarterback more consistently, and you need to get after it when it matters. I mean, because and the reason I say that is I would love it if they finish the year in the top 10 in sacks or sacks plus hits on the quarterback and total pressures, because that's going to lead to the way the secondary is. That's going to lead to a lot of turnovers and a lot of stops. But I would rather rank 20th in the country in sacks, but knowing that this team can get to the quarterback when they need to, than be top 10 in sacks, but can't get after the quarterback when it matters. Sometimes those things go hand in hand, but
yeah, it's huge.
It's what I want to see.
Well, it's huge, especially when you're going to be breaking in a new safety. You're going to have some different guys on the D line. I mean, if you can create pressures without blitzing, it's going to make your defense that much better. I mean, Al Golden put a lot of pressure on his secondary, obviously, especially on the corners. Put him on islands, did some different things. Obviously, more often than not, they were up for the task. If you don't have to do that, that still makes you better. And so, and then it allows you to blitz when you want to, as opposed to when you need to. And I think that's going to be the key for this defense, right?
I like it. You guys, that's my other saying, right?
Yeah.
You want to blitz when you want to, not because you have to.
And same thing with offense, right? You want to throw the ball when you want to, not when you have to. It's the same philosophy for me. And that's going to be the difference between a good defense and a great defense. And look, none of us are saying that they don't have the talent to be that. They do. They have the talent.
They'll be a top 15 defense this year,
regardless.
No doubt about that.
Yes. But will they be a top 5 defense?
Will they be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, right.
Because I think that is a top 5 defense.
Right.
I agree completely. And I think these last two things, Trevor, go hand in hand. It's what is a key part of being a really good run defense, and what's a key part of being a really good pass rushing defense. It's the front seven.
Yep.
And I think that at the end of the day, the line play is going to be vital on both sides of the ball, but also linebackers playing at a higher level. That's a part of this thing that I'm really curious to see, is what kind of responsibility does he place on the shoulders of the linebackers? Al Golden put a lot on the shoulders of the linebackers from a responsibility standpoint, but not from a production standpoint. Like, you go look at it, the linebackers under Al Golden were not super productive in the ways that other teams are. Jack Kaiser in 16 games last year had 90 tackles. Drake Bowen had 78 tackles. You say, well, yeah, they played 16 games. Yeah, but they played about 16 games worth of 12 to 13 games worth of snaps. I mean, if you look at, they were in a rotation, if you look and say, well, yeah, they played 16 games and all this and that. But like, if you actually think about it, the production was even less because they did play 16 games. And the year before in 13 games, you're leading, actually, you only played 12, but your leading tackler the year before was a linebacker who had 76 tackles in 12 games. And your number 2 leading tackler was a D tackle. That's usually not good. Your leading tackler in 2022 was J.D. Bertrand with 82. The year before that, your leading tackler with Marcus Freeman as the D coordinator is 101. The 2020 was a little bit of a different year. You had 2 linebackers at over 80 tackles and another at 79 in 2019. And then, of course, in 2018, you had Tavon Coney with 123 and Drew Tranquill at 86. So in 2017, you had Tavon Coney with 116, Niles Morgan with 892, Drew Tranquill with 85, and your number 4 linebacker, Greer Martini, was 4th in run defense with 75. yeah, there's more production to be had from the linebacker position. That just wasn't what Al Golden did, and that's fine. It worked. I'm not saying that needs to change. I'm saying I'm curious to see if that changes under Chris Ash.
Yeah, I think that could be the biggest schematic change we see with Chris Ash. There's been a lot of conversation around man versus zone, and it's fun to talk about. But you saw some of the odd fronts in the spring game this year. Is that due to personnel? Or were they trying something out? Who knows? But I think the responsibility.
Or were they just running out of linemen?
Yeah,
you know what I mean, with all the injuries.
Is it players available that they could roll out there? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you think about it, I think one of the biggest schematic changes that you could see is the linebacker performance and what they're asked to do on a down by down basis. But it's a big question. I love that you deviated and talked about pressure getting home with the front four. I think that's massive. Again, I point to the postseason. Notre Dame, out of the 4 semifinal teams, had the least ineffective pass rush in the front four, kind of by a lot. And so that's going to be the difference.
Part of that was injury related.
Yes.
That would not have been true if Riley Mills was healthy the whole season and if Boubacar Traore stayed healthy the whole season.
Exactly.
So, I mean, part of it is like, it's not, by design. Part of it was you were missing some guys that could get after it. And you didn't have an Abdul Carter. You didn't have, Jack Sawyer and JT and guys like that. You didn't have a Colin Simmons. Bryce Young, Bryce Young's very talented, but he's not Colin Simmons right now. He maybe could be someday, but he wasn't last year.
Yeah.
So part of it was talent, but maybe the conversation's different if Boubacar's healthy all year.
Sure.
What does the pass rush look like against Ohio State on that 4th down play if you've got Boubacar Traore and Riley Mills on the field?
Yeah.
Going up against a beat-up Ohio State offensive line. That game could look real different. Not that all of a sudden they're better than Ohio State. It's about matchups.
Mm-hmm.
And that offensive line for Ohio State, which was very beat up, what does that line look like if they've got to block Riley Mills all game and Boubacar Traore all game? So part of it is personnel, and you were missing some guys who happen to be really good at that. But part of it also was, that's kind of what the scheme was for. So just some thoughts.
Yeah.
Just some deep thoughts with Brian Driscoll.
Deep thoughts.
See, you got it this time. I said it the other day and you didn't get it. I was like, man, I thought that was good stuff. That's a Jack Handy reference.
I know, right?
Get it.
I got it this time.
Trevor to get it. He was like a baby when that was coming out. But I expected you to get it.
At best.
Yeah, it probably came out before he was born.
Right.
But,
no, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So that's actually going to do it for our big questions for the team going into the 2025 season, just in time for fall practice to kick off here in a couple days. And so, but make sure before you guys, still got a Navy preview, but before you guys head out, or before, why not right now, just hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, jump on the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All of the pre-camp intel is out. It's all. Is it all out? No, there's still a little bit more. Oh,
I have another one coming out tonight and another one tomorrow.
2 more to come out. So if you're not a member of the premium message board,
I was just going to do D-line last night, but by the time I got with all the ends, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make this 2.
Let's see.
Plus, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was starting to get to the point where I was starting to get a little bit tired. And I was like, I'm just going to do this tomorrow.
Lord. Yeah. Oh, man. Burning the midnight oil, Brian Driscoll.
It's not my preference. It's just got a business to run.
You got that right. So you definitely want to jump on the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of the intel leading into fall camp. And then once fall camp starts, the intel doesn't stop. And so you're definitely going to want to be on the premium message board.